Today I'm going to be walking you guys through the process of sterilizing your jars and lids, as well as setting up your pressure canner and walking you through the pressure canning process. In this video, we're not going to be actually canning any food. We're just going to be pressure canning water just to get the hang of things and so you don't risk ruining any of your food. So as you can see, I've already washed my 7-quart jars as well as my lids and rings, and I'm going to go ahead and put my quart jars onto this baking sheet. They are going to go in the oven. So there are actually 2 ways to sterilize jars, and I like using the oven method. So I'm going to put these jars in there at 225 degrees for 20 minutes. If you don't want to do the oven method, then you can submerge your jars in boiling water for 10 minutes and it sterilizes the jars also. If you are doing the oven method for sterilizing your jars, it's important to know that you don't start timing until it reaches 225 degrees and then you start your timer for 20 minutes. And then the same goes for the water. So this pot of water is going to be for my jar lids, and I am going to go ahead and put them in there, but I'm not going to start the timer until they have boiled for 10 minutes. There is no right or wrong with this. It is all just personal preference. So my jars are working on being sterilized, and then these lids are also working on being sterilized. So the thing about canning is it's all a process, but you don't really spend much time waiting until you're actually in the process of pressure canning. You're waiting on your jars and your lids, then you can go ahead and be getting your canner ready for water. I promise it is clean, but I just cannot get these stains out. We have a really hard water. Recently, I've actually switched because we got a Berkey filter, and so I actually put all filtered water in to the canner, and then especially in my canning jars, anytime I put water in my jars, I do not use tap water just because ours is so hard. As you can see, I've already got my canning rack down in there. I always let my canner sit on the stove and I bring the water to it. I just think it's easier that way. But if you want to go ahead and fill your canner with water, look at your handles. So there's a handle on each side, and on my case, it's on this side. So look directly below this. Right here, you can kind of see there's like a divot in the... I don't know if you can kind of tell or not, but there's a divot. There's a small line right here. And if you run your finger over it, it's actually an indentation. So if you take your finger and run all the way down to the bottom of your canner and feel that very last one, then that is how full you need your canner to be. So just fill your canner to that bottom line. But if you're like me and you would just bring the water to your canner, it measures out to be about 3 quarts of water. Now I've got my 3 quarts of water in here. I'm sure you can't tell. Maybe you can tell it's moving. Also, it goes up to that very bottom line, like I said. So it's either 3 quarts or to your bottom line, whichever you prefer to do. So at this point, I go ahead and turn my canner on a low heat. And your stove is probably different than mine. Mine just has low, medium, high, and then it has a simmer function. But my stove is super old. It's 1956, so... on your modern stove, I would probably put it on about 2, and you're just wanting this water to warm up some because you need warm water in this, not like boiling or anything like that. You just want this water to start heating up because you're going to be putting hot jars and you want hot water to be in this. So I ended up moving my lids to the back burner, and then up here I put a large stock pot, and I just have it filled with water, and we're just waiting on this to heat up because this is the water that we're going to put into our jars. So at this point, you should have your jars inside your oven sterilizing or in a pot on the stove boiling. And then you should have your lids sterilizing, a pot of hot water going so that you can fill your jars, and then a canner with your 3 quarts of water in it, and it should be heating up as well. So my water is ready, my jars are ready, and my lids are ready back there. It wasn't as quite as hot as I wanted it, so I just now turned it up to medium low, and you don't want it boiling, but just hot so it doesn't like shock the jars whenever you put them in. But I'm going to get my counter set up. So I've already got one towel here, and I'm going to set up another towel here just so that my stock pot can sit on this. was turn off my oven and my burners. I brought my jars over here and got them laid out. And then I brought my hot water over. So what you're going to need for this process is a funnel. And then I prefer using just a scoop like this, like a measuring cup. But you can also use a ladle like this, whatever works best for you. And then you will need jar lifter, a magnetic lid wand, and a debubbler, but you're just going to use it for the measurements on the side. So I've got you zoomed out, and what you're going to do is everything is hot, so you just have to be careful not to burn yourself, but you need it to be hot. You're just going to start ladling the water into the jars. And this is why you need everything to be hot, because if you were to take hot water and pour it into a cold jar, it would shock the jar and bust. And you're just going to leave about an inch of headspace. So if you have never canned before, this is where your debubbler tool will come in handy. And I don't know if you can see this at all. Maybe you can see. It has like inch, 3/4, ½ inch, and 1/4 inch measurements on the side right here. So how you use this is if you need 1 inch, which is right here, you're just going to lay that on your jar and it should barely be touching the water. I'll let you know that you have an inch headspace, but once you start canning, you start learning. But 1 inch headspace if you don't have a debubbler and you're just wanting to get started and try and figure out this process before you have all your tools, just fill your jar to the bottom of this neck. So this right here is called your shoulder of the jar, and this is like the base of your neck of the jar. So just fill it to the base of the neck. Now that I have my jars filled with water, I'm just going to use white distilled vinegar, and I'm going to put it on a paper towel and wipe the rims of the jars off. This is just to ensure that there's nothing on the jar, especially if you're pressure canning things like meat and just anything with fat in it. It can get on the rims of the jars, and if that happens, then you won't get a good seal. But you just want to wipe them off and make sure that there's nothing on them. And we're going to use our lid wand to reach in our pot just so that you don't burn yourself. That's the purpose. And because the water is still really hot, it's boiling water still. So it just sticks to the lid. You don't touch it at all, and this keeps it sterile. You just place that there. You use the tip of your finger. I use my fingernail so it doesn't burn my finger. And then you just put this on like finger tight. You're not cranking the lid on. Now that our jars are full, now it's time to place them into our canner, and this is hot water down in there. So this is where your jar lifter comes in, and this just keeps you from getting burned. And you just gently place them in there, like don't bang them down in there, but just gently place the jars down in there. Now that our jars are in there, it is time to put the lid on. So what you're going to do is just turn your lid over and inspect the rubber gasket first. You just want to make sure that you don't see any cracks. Now you're going to set your lid onto your canner, and it should sit on there. You can kind of hear it like lock in, like sometimes you can't get your lid on, and like right there your lid is not on. There's no way it's going to bolt on. So you just have to make sure it's on correctly and just move it around until it falls in place. And then you're going to spin your lid and lock it in place. Your handles should be aligned. Your handles should look like this. You can see that they're aligned, and that's how you know it's locked in. This part is really important. You have to leave your regulator off. So steam is going to come out of here, and you need it to do that. So don't put this on yet. You have to wait. What we're going to do next is go ahead and turn up our heat. Go ahead and turn your burner over to a medium high. And I like to build my heat up. Sometimes if you go straight to a high point, then you can bust the bottom of your jars if it gets too hot too quick. And I forgot to mention that I am going to be doing the dial gauge canner first. So I'll include the time that you can skip to, but if you have the weighted canner, then I will go ahead and insert the time that you can go ahead and skip to. It has been a few minutes, so now I'm going to go ahead and turn my heat up to high. And I do just want to say that we are not keeping these jars, and you're not keeping yours, or at least I hope not. So don't follow this video if you're wanting to can water. But this is just to simply get you used to using the canner, walk you through the process of how to sterilize jars, and just to work your canner properly. Just going to dump them at the very end. So as you can see, this is the air vent, and you can see that the steam is coming out. Whenever it gets built up, it is going to pop out and it'll seal off. So we're just waiting on that right now, and then we are going to wait on the steam to come out of that vent back there. So as you saw, that just now sealed off. So hopefully you can see this, but this has sealed off and you can see the steam coming out back here. So you want that coming out a good steady stream for 10 minutes. So go ahead and start your timer for 10 minutes, and then at the end of the 10 minutes, that is whenever you are going to set your regulator on. And I like to use an oven mitt to put it on, or either tongs, just so I don't burn my hand from the steam. So while we're waiting on this, and it still has to go for like 8 minutes, so I'm just going to chat with you guys about the process of pressure canning and when you would use it and why. So anytime you have low acidic foods, so that's things like meat, beans, your vegetables, things like that, they have to be pressure canned, and they have to reach 240 degrees in order for it to kill botulism spores. So anytime you're canning food, there's a concern with botulism. That is why you have to pressure can, so it'll kill that off. And another thing during canning is you want to be as sterile as possible. So that's why I sterilize my jars and my lids. There's a lot of controversy out there. Some people say you don't have to do that. Some people say you do. But I like to err on the side of caution, and I always sterilize just to be on the safe side. I always wear my hair up, or either in a hat or something, just to keep any hair from getting in the food or in the jars. And while I'm getting the jars ready with the food, during every step I always wash my hands. So always wash your hands. In your pressure canner right now, what is happening is this water that you put in the bottom of the canner, it is building up steam and it's venting out. So you have to have that vent for 10 minutes. And once you put your regulator on, then it will start to build up your poundage. And then at that point, it'll process for the allotted amount of time. And during that process, that is whenever it reaches the 240 degrees and it kills off your botulism spores. So as you can see right now, hopefully, the dial gauge is at 0 pounds of pressure. And that is just because you are still in the venting process. So I just now put my pressure regulator on, and you can see that the pressure is already starting to build on the dial gauge. So once it reaches 10 pounds of pressure, we're going to go ahead and start our timer for 30 minutes and let it process for 30 minutes at 10 pounds. Like I said, this is just for practice. This is not to actually keep the water. We are just trying to experiment with our canner and learn the functions of it and how it does. So go ahead and pressure can at 10 pounds, but just know that whenever you start canning with a recipe, you will need to find your altitude, which you can do that with a simple Google search, and you can figure out what pressure you need. So some people need 5 pounds, some people need 10, and then 15. It just depends on where you live and your altitude. And you want to Google your city and not your county. Your county is too broad. You want to do your city so that you can narrow it down a little bit more. But once this gets up to 10 pounds, you want it to stay at 10 pounds. So as soon as this hits to 10 pounds, you're going to want to turn your heat down on your stove to probably about a 5 medium heat. That way it does not continue to go above 10 pounds because it'll just continue to rise. But if you start to notice that it falls below 10 pounds, then you're going to want to turn your heat back up. You just want to keep it as steady as you can on 10 pounds by adjusting your heat. So we are at 10 pounds. It's actually almost to 11 pounds, but we're going to try and keep it at 10 pounds and just by adjusting our heat, like I said. So I'm going to let this go for 30 minutes. I let my canner go for about 30 minutes and turn your burner completely off. Do not touch anything on the canner. You are just turning off your burner back there on the stove. Now you're just going to leave your canner alone. Do not touch the regulator. Don't touch the air vent. Don't touch anything because it is under so much pressure right now. You're going to let it completely decompress and you're not going to touch anything until you see this go all the way back down. But that should not go back down until it reaches 0 pounds of pressure. So as you can see, this air vent right here is completely down. It's no longer up and the dial gauge is at 0 pounds. So now we know that it is safe to remove. So what I like to do is go ahead and take this off. I still use my oven mitt just in case. You're going to push on this and spin it until it unlocks, and you always want to make sure you open it away from you. So you're going to tilt it this way, never open it like this. So you're going to pick up on it, and these can still be hot. So grab your oven mitts again and turn it away from you to release the steam that way so it doesn't blow in your face. I just let it drip off for a second and then lay it on your stove. At this point, go ahead and remove your jars so that they can begin cooling. You never want to leave them in the pressure canner overnight, especially because they won't cool properly. Now now we are moving on to the weighted gauge canner. So this canner is going to be set up the exact same. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 3 quarts of water in here. This canner is going to be the exact same as the other, so look for your handle, and there is the divot or the line right there. Hopefully you can see it, maybe. But you're just going to either put 3 quarts of water or fill it to that very bottom line, which equals out to be about 3 quarts of water. Once this gets warm, we're going to go ahead and put these jars into here. These are the jars that we used in the other canner, but I'm just going to repurpose them and use them in this canner as well. But it would all be the same exact process. So if you want to know what the sterilization process was for these and the lids, then go back and watch the beginning half of this video. So the canner is nice and hot now. So I'm going to use my jar lifter to go ahead and put these jars in. I'm going to go ahead and put my lid on, which this one goes on the same way. You just set it on and twist. If you have a hard time getting your lid on, then more than likely it's on backwards, so flip your lid around. And you need to remove your weight from the canner. Now we're going to go ahead and turn our heat up a little. Wait on this air vent to pop up, and then once that pops, we're going to wait on steam to come out of this for 10 minutes. So while we're waiting on that to heat up, we're going to go ahead and get our weight ready. So this is the weighted gauge that sits on top of your canner, and you're just going to unscrew the black part. So altogether this is 15. So we're going to remove one of these, which represents 5 pounds. So we're going to go ahead and take that off. This is 5 pounds and this is 5 pounds. So I'm going to be processing this at 10 pounds. So we're going to go ahead and leave this weight on. And now we have our 10 pounds, and this will be ready to set on once we get it vented. Now that the air vent has sealed off, we're going to wait on steam to come out of the middle vent for 10 minutes. So the part where you put your weight on, we're going to wait on steam to come out for 10 minutes. It's been 10 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and put the weight on. And you can either use an oven mitt or a set of tongs, whatever you have, so that you don't burn yourself, because that steam is hot. So I just place it on. And now what we're waiting for is this to jiggle. So once that starts to jiggle back and forth, and you'll know, it'll start making a noise, and that's whenever you start your timer. We're going to be pressure canning this for about 30 minutes. And it's not to keep the water, like I said, and if you watched the previous tutorial on the canner, we are just doing this to familiarize ourselves with the canner. So the canner just started jiggling, and as you can tell, it is very obvious whenever it does because of how loud it is. So we're going to go ahead and set our timer for 30 minutes and let this process. I'm going to actually turn my heat down to a medium heat, and you can go ahead and turn yours down also. If yours starts to slow down jiggling, just turn back up your heat. You turned it too low. It has been 30 minutes, so now we are going to shut off our heat, and we're not going to do anything to the canner. We are just going to let this go on its own, and it'll eventually stop jiggling, and this valve right here will go back down. Once the valve goes back down, then you can remove your weight, but wait 10 minutes before you take off your lid. Use oven mitts just because sometimes these handles still can be a little bit hot, and you're just going to push, and you're going to open it away from yourself. So always never open it towards yourself because the steam will burn you. So always open it like that, away from you. And just hold it there and let the water drain off. And now we can go ahead and start removing our jars. After your canners have completely cooled, I like to use warm soapy water and just wash them like you would your normal dishes. It helps prevent buildup on your canners. And also whenever canning food, sometimes the jars can leak off or anything. So you want to make sure you wash your canners after every time. But that is going to be it for today's video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys will like and subscribe.